Hello everybody, happy History Hump Day. How is your Tuesday going? Whoa, I'm early, except I'm actually a week late, kind of, almost. But how is your week? How's it going? It's so hot. Why does it have to be hot in July? Like, it's July, it's not supposed to be hot, you know? Save that for like December or Christmas time. What is this, Australia? Anyway. Hope your history is going well. I hope the history of your life has been going well, because we're studying the history of humans and all the different things. Here's the thing about history that I think I finally realized after reading 2 chapters of a history book. Whoa, it's so much for me. No, 3 chapters. I just finished the 3rd chapter of The Dawn of Everything. Look it up in your library. It's pretty good. But after reading 3 chapters, I realized history is complicated. I still don't really remember everything that they talked about just in the 3 chapters. Although they're very long chapters and it's like 500 pages long. It's a very thick book. But I just realized, it just made me realize how hard it is to understand history. And honestly, everything. It's hard to understand literally everything in the world. But history is very complicated. And I guess that's kind of the point that we end up with in this last part of the 3rd chapter, before I have to bring this book back to the library. I'll have to find a different history book. What we read, like kind of the last 10 pages of the 3rd chapter. And basically the whole point that they conclude is that, guess what? Humans are humans. They're just like we are now. Some people are more like this and some people are more like that. Some people are more power hungry and some people aren't. I don't know. I kind of think we're all power hungry and we're all sinful equally in our hearts. That's the Christian belief. At least most Christians probably believe that. There might be some Christians who don't. But the question is, when we look at human history, we're really looking at the philosophy of humanity. What are humans at their core? Are they evil or good? Are they power hungry, hierarchical? What were the questions they were asking at the end? About human nature, I guess, is one way to put it, instead of humans, because you're looking at the heart of the human. We've been mostly asking the wrong questions. Are festival rituals expressions of authority or vehicles of social creativity? I've never thought of that question, but that is an interesting question. Basically, religion, the religion that we believe, is it a result of us wanting authority and control, or is it just our way of creating things in our brains? Of course, Christianity is the true one, but when you look at other religions that I would say are false, why do people believe those? Are they reactionary or progressive? Were our earliest ancestors simple and egalitarian, or complex and stratified? Is human nature innocent or corrupt? Are we as species inherently cooperative or competitive, kind or selfish, good or evil? And sometimes, even though as a Christian I believe that we're all evil, compared to God, obviously He's the source of all good, and we have all been corrupted by sin, but we are created by God, so obviously we were created to be good. But even still, even with that belief, sometimes it's like, I don't know, this sounds really prideful, but sometimes you're like, am I really that bad? Like, really? Like, have I really done anything that bad? Like, I don't know. I could ask all the people that I've interacted with in my life and be like, have I hurt you so bad that, like, I'm an evil, terrible person? And no, from human perspective, most of us seem to be at least decent. Like, most people don't murder people. Most people don't cause significant harm to others to the point where they are traumatized forever. But you might have accidentally contributed in somebody's trauma, but I don't know, I think most people would look at that and recognize that it doesn't seem that bad, probably because we all do it. So I don't know, but what leads somebody to go and murder somebody? Is the bad feelings that I have in my heart, if I were in their situation with their brain, would have I murdered somebody? That's kind of that's the Christian sort of philosophy of, like, we all have that in our heart, and we all would do it if we were in that situation. Like Jesus says, if you hate somebody, it's literally as if you murdered them in your heart, because that is what it leads to. But it's really hard to wrap your brain around it, because for me, I'm like, no, hating somebody in your heart or being mad at them, even the verse I think says being angry with them, is not as bad as murder. Like, is it, even if you totally hate them but you don't murder them, like that's better. I don't know, in my brain. But that's because my brain is corrupt, so it's this loop. It's just a loop. Anyway, what they really found interesting was how societies in the tribal days, when they were hunter-gatherers, would switch back and forth. We talked about this last History Hump Day. They'd switch back and forth in different seasons of life. I think it was like the winter season or the rainy season or something, where they would be, I forget which season, depending on the season and how it was. Basically, when it was time to hunt, which I would assume would be the summer or something, they would become a lot more authoritarian, and they would congregate together, and they would be less tribal. All the tribes would come together, and there'd be one ruler more authoritarian, and it would be like a power-hungry type of thing. It would look like a power-hungry guy, authoritarian, tyrannical government, to go out and get the job done, because tyranny does work sometimes to get the job done. But then when it was time for freedom and they all had their food and stuff, they would all split back into their little tiny bands and be free, be egalitarian and all that, because they could afford it. So freedom does come at a cost, I guess you could say, in a different type of way. But also, when we fight for freedom, you have to fight the tyranny in order to have freedom. I don't know, it's confusing. But it's very interesting because tribal people, a lot of people think that the tribal people aren't as smart because they don't have these political organizations. But what if they're actually smarter because they know about those political advancement, power domination type things. They know about those governments, and they purposely don't want it. They're purposely saying, I don't want to live in that tyranny. And what we would consider political advancement, tyranny, power-hungry, centralized power, these tribal communities are like, we don't want that, and they know about it. We assume that they just don't know they're just too dumb to be able to congregate, but actually they do know about it, and they purposely have a system so that they divide up, and that power, centralized power, can't emerge from that. Which I found this very interesting quote from this book about that. You can't speak of an evolution from band to tribe to chiefdom to state if your starting points are groups that move fluidly between them as a matter of habit. Oh wait, that wasn't the quote that I wanted. But that's also an interesting quote. Because they would have their chiefs would be like really poor, and they would have to work the hardest because they had to set an example. So that was interesting. But the one thing about them is they were allowed to have multiple wives, but their wives were allowed to also have other, I don't know, partners, which is weird. I don't know if this is even true for all of them. Maybe this is just some of the tribes. But, oh yeah, it says, if any of those wives looked to other lovers, which it appears they ordinarily did, there was nothing much the chiefs could do about it, since he had to keep himself in everyone's good graces to remain chief. So that's funny. Like the chiefs, the big tyrannical guys, when they were in centralized power for certain seasons, even the guys in power didn't get anything out of it. They probably didn't even want to be in power. They literally had to do all this work and get nothing out of it, besides multiple wives who would cheat on them anyways. So what's the point of that? What's the point of being a leader then, if you're not going to get anything out of it? Sign of a good leader. Although, even in those tyrannical tribes, I remember reading last time that they would still kill people sometimes. Like, they would be so tyrannical. It would come to the point of death, and it's like, whoa. So this wasn't just a game they'd play back and forth. It was real. They were really actually tyrannical, which is crazy. But I found the quote. So, basically, again, my point about how we think that people in tribes are in tribes because they're not smart enough to be in centralized domination power type of structures of government. What we would look at centralized power of government and we'd say that's smarter, that's advanced. But maybe the people in tribes are actually smarter because of course they know that it's possible to have centralized power, but they choose not, they purposely have a system to not allow that centralized power. So they're literally smarter than us. And this is the quote. They had self-consciously organized in such a way that the forms of arbitrary power and domination that we associate with advanced political systems could never possibly emerge. What does that mean? I had to read that sentence over and over again. It means that they knew about the advanced political systems, or what we consider advanced political systems, the centralized power in very organized states. They knew about those. Like even the Amazonians would have known about empires nearby. Because people got around, like this book says, people got around. They would have known about them, but they didn't want that. So they purposely set up a system, and they lived in a way where power was constantly shifting, power was constantly divided. They were divided up into tribes. So we look at that and we say, oh, they're not advanced enough because they're just staying in their tribes. Oh, they don't have as much technology, or they don't invent as many things. That's actually smarter, though. That's a smarter way to live, because there's more freedom for people to switch back and forth. And some of these tribes would switch back and forth between a more authoritarian or less authoritarian, more egalitarian, between the seasons. There was flexibility. And that's what's cool about the United States, I will say. Even though we are more of a state-like thing, we have different states. And you can have different powers in each state. And if you don't like your state, you can go and move to a different state. And if a state says, I don't want to be like that, Texas doesn't want to be like California, then they can rule differently. And they do. And that's why Texas is better. I'm pretty sure everybody's moving away from California and going to Texas. But the point is, there should be flexibility. And I think that's really cool. So I really like that quote and that idea of, I don't know, flexibility. But then also it gets confusing. Maybe I also understand why people want tyranny. Just bring back the king and make everything just one simple thing so we know. Maybe it's really tyrannical, but at least we know. And it's not like constantly changing and we have to, I guess constantly changing would be kind of hard. But I guess I'm saying that the tribal people were smarter. Maybe sometimes they weren't, sometimes they were. Sometimes the states have smart ways of doing it. The point is, when we're trying to figure out the state of humanity, and that's what this chapter ends with, these questions. What is humanity? What is the nature of humanity? And we try to look to how it used to be, and we think of Rousseau when he thought that they were all these innocent doves, and then you have Hobbes who thinks that we are naturally hierarchical. And you try to look at the old humans from long ago, and you say, this is what we were meant, this is what humans are. But it turns out that they're just like all of us, really. They might be a little bit different, but they're actually different in the sense that they were all even more diverse, even more different from one another. So basically, the answer to the question, from a philosophical standpoint, maybe not necessarily a Christian standpoint, theologically I would say that we're all evil sinners, but from a philosophical, when you just look at it as a human, like from God's perspective we're all sinners, but from a human's perspective, are humans evil or good? It's basically just whatever they decide to be.